The incredible disparity between Gen Zers and their interaction with mental health, specifically antidepressants, men and women. This is a crazy thing that's being published on CNN. So this isn't some far-right Fox News, anything like that. This is CNN reporting this. Check this out. With the decline in youth mental health comes another concerning trend. All right, check this out. Many young people have reported having poor mental health problems during and after COVID-19. Their experiences are affirmed by a new study finding that the rate of prescribing antidepressants to this group also spiked during the same period. The number of young people between 12 and 25, this is Zoomers, right, receiving antidepressants was already growing during the pandemic. But since the outbreak, the dispensing rate rose nearly 64% faster than normal, according to the study published Monday in the Journal of Pediatrics. So this is the stuff they're being prescribed, the antidepressant. The difference by sex are by far the thing that stood out to me the most. All right? Why? Because in female adolescents, scroll down, 12 to 17, the dispensing rate increased 130% after March 2020. For female young adults ages 18 to 25, the rate spiked by 60%. So young women, young Gen Zers, are way overprescribed antidepressants.
Yeah.
Right? Stark contrast, what we see is essentially no change in antidepressants dispensing after March 2020 in male young adults. So no increase in male young adults, 130 to 60% increase in females and women, young women. A few earlier studies assessed changes in post-pandemic dispensing rate nationally, but to the author's knowledge, the new study is the first one specific of adolescents and young adults and to analyze data beyond 2020. I found myself during the pandemic prescribing antidepressants at rates I'd never seen before. I can't tell you how many pediatricians have told me that they feel like they're just mental health clinicians at this point.
Eesh.
Right? She found that the dispensing rate increased 63%, a trend that surged during and after the pandemic. By the second year of the pandemic, emergency room visits with poor mental health in youth rose and saw an uptick in attempts of self-deletion, self-harm. Yeah. So there's a lot of stressors impacting kids. So here's the interesting part. So you see a massive uptick between men and women, young boys, young girls. You know what we also see a massive disparity on right now, which is growing crazy right now, is the shifting political views of Gen Zers. I don't know if you could pull up something on this, Zach. Gen Z boys becoming more conservative. The disparities between young men and young women, Gen Zers, is that young boys are progressively becoming way more, further and further conservative in their views on social issues, on morality issues. And women, young women, are going further and further and further and further to the left. A poll recently found that male Gen Z high schoolers have grown significantly more conservative, and female Gen Z high schoolers have grown more liberal. Is this accurate in your personal opinion? Okay, so that's what they're asking. So this is 12th graders.
1970, these are all the years.
Yep.
And then 2020.
Look, it's interesting. They're saying that women were more conservative in this 1975. That's before all the laws that the dudes Cape before passed. Where did you go to?
This is the political identity of 12th grade girls. They're liberal spikes. And then this is 12th grade this is the political identities of 12th grade boys. The conservatism spikes.
That's crazy. Interesting. So I'm curious, this is just me asking, if we're seeing higher rates of self-deletion attempts, higher rates of self-harm, higher rates of depression, higher rates of antidepressant prescriptions, and we're seeing this lower in boys.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying causation is correlation, but there does seem to be some correlation.
So you think everyone should become a Republican?
Nope, I said nothing about being no Republican. But if your values align with, hey, my call is for me to solve my own problems and figure out what my own issues are, and ultimately I'm the one that's driving my life and making the decisions to make my life better or worse. It's my choices versus it's the system's fault, it's society's fault, it's the patriarchy's fault, it's capitalism's fault, it's this person's fault, it's that person's fault. How are you going to view the world?
Yeah.
Right?
Very true.
And so if you just feel helpless because everything is going to hell in a handbasket, then it would make sense why you're depressed, right? It would make sense why you are having all these mental health issues and struggling. And it seems like it's, I mean, the fact that there's such a disparity between men and women, young men and women.
Yeah.
And there's such a disparity between political views. How are these folks ever going to get married?
What did they say? 20% of Gen Z is
30,
LGTB?
it's higher than that.
30%?
It's like 30%.
Ugh. Yeah, 30%. So then that eliminates 30% of the people from even the having kids pool.
Mm-hmm.
You probably add, another...
Yeah, because they think the imminent crisis is the world's coming to an end. They have their own apocalypse. It's called climate justice.
Yeah.
Right? The world's going to come to an end by 2030. We got to get rid of gas cars, all this sort of stuff. And so, like, that's their imminent apocalypse. They think a rapture is about to happen.
Yeah. Well, and then you add another 50% of Gen Z that's probably left-leaning, right? And left-leaning means freezing eggs, having kids way later in life, or having kids, or not having kids at all. And so then you're left with, like, the traditional 80-20 rule, right? Which is, like, 20% of Gen Z, which is probably the more conservative, is going to make up 80% of the results when it comes to birthing children. So the first Gen Z parents you're going to see are going to be probably more conservative, right? And then there's a solid 80% of Gen Z that's between the LGTB people and the left-leaning people that are going to be opting out of kids or not having kids at all. So I actually think that the next generation that comes from Gen Z is going to be predominantly conservative because it's going to be more conservatives that are having babies, and the liberals won't even be passing down their ideology to anybody because they're not going to be having kids. Yeah, well, I actually watched a video about that I wanted to get into. We don't have time today. We'll look at it tomorrow. But it literally walks people through that. It's like, hey, those of you guys that are, what's the dual income, no kids? Dinks. Dual income, no kids.
The dinks are going to do themselves in. Because you're not going to have any kids, and in a generation or two, there won't be any dinks because y'all didn't have kids. Yeah. And so the folks that are going to continue reproducing are going to be the folks who have children, and they tend to be more conservative and more religious. Yep. Zuby had the prediction that we're going to see a massive disparity in people's quality of life, like how you're brought up, and that like he's like, hey, like I think the access and the lifestyle and the success our kids are going to have is going to be at a way huge disparity than the other people who have kids.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because fathers in a home, because access to information, education, morality, values.
So you're going to see all these sweet little families with 2 to 5 kids that are like happy, healthy, wealthy. Yep. And then you're going to see a bunch of single moms with these little kids with purple hair.
And those folks are probably going to be less likely to have kids. They're already less likely to have kids now.
Ugh.
Brutal. So we'll get into that video tomorrow. But yeah, so by the way, what I'm not saying is that leftism is a mental health issue. Not what I'm saying. I'm saying that according to this study, the disparity is massive. So much so that CNN ran this. Ooh. It's not Fox News. It's not Breitbart. CNN ran this.
They just didn't make the correlation between conservatism and liberalism.
I then connected that mental health issues are higher amongst liberal kids than conservative kids, and that women tend to lean harder left and men tend to lean harder right at this age, at this demographic, which then creates a whole nother recipe of like how and who are they going to meet and how are they going to get married. I mean, political views is up there with religious views, like if you're marrying someone that's like a far leftist and you're conservative, like that's creating a recipe for disaster. We see according to the Bible that prayer is extremely important in terms of us being transformed from the inside out when we get aligned with God's will. For the Christians watching this channel, I want you guys to implement these spiritual disciplines in your day-to-day life. And the only way I've been able to do this consistently is through writing down my prayers in a prayer journal that does a few things. One, it allows me to reflect and come to God humbly and ask Him to move on my behalf. And 2, it allows me to document my prayers, which ultimately help me remember the very things that I was praying for and see the hand of God tangibly in my life when He answers them. So I would urge you, consider writing down your prayers. It could be in a blank notebook. It could even be on your phone. Or you could check out the one I personally designed and used from my own quiet time and spiritual discipline that I think will be a huge blessing. It's the exact structure and system that I've used for years to pray and be more consistent in my spiritual disciplines. You can pick yours up today by clicking the link in the pinned comment below. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.